Am I streaming the wrong page? Yeah, fantastic. Bear with. What a muppet. Is it this one? There we go. Wow. Well, an amazing way to start the call this evening. Good evening. Welcome, YouTube peoples, to Norfolk Developers. I'm Alex, and we're joined this evening by Amy for emotional regulation, understanding feelings and top tips for being okay. A quick word about things coming up for Norfolk Developers. Next month, April streams, React Native Fork It, although that is my title and not theirs, but that might change next month. But React Native going to be going all out onto the GitHub, open source. So by all means, grab yourself a copy and have a play around. Should be interesting. Join us at 5:30 every Wednesday for a couple of hours. Then in April 15th, should you consider Rescript over TypeScript for your next project, joined by Tom to talk about Rescript. Looks quite exciting. I've actually been looking into it today. And then many more in the pipeline. Flutter coming up in May, contracts for freelancers even, top tips for effective CI, CD, and many, many more. So on the subject of Wednesday streams, let's go build a bot. Yesterday, well, it wasn't yesterday actually, it'll be next Wednesday at 5:30. Join Dom and Golang while he builds a Discord bot. Virtual Social Club every Friday. It's been going for a year now, which is crazy. 5:30 until late. Pop along anytime, drop in, say hi. Quick shout out to everyone as well, hosted by you. We are always looking for new speakers and topics to whet the appetite. So just drop us a message anywhere. You find us anywhere, to be honest. Quick mention of Discord, which is where you will find us for sure. The user story as well. Kindly sponsor the Discord server and the quarterly engagement prize. Drop into there to find out what that's all about. But if you're on the lookout for UX design, lab, user research, drop the user story a line. Our sponsors, we are looking for full-time corporate sponsors. And to be fair, there's one on the pipeline. It should be good, should be good. A shout out to patrons. Thank you very much. You have literally kept the lights on as we've gone through this pandemic. So thank you very much, many of which are on the call this evening, so thank you. But anyway, I'm going to get out of the way and pass swiftly on to Amy for a little tour of emotional regulation, something that this chap apparently quite needs. So without further ado, I'm going to get out of the way. Thanks, Amy.
Thanks, Alex. All right, I'm just going to make sure I get my screen up because I always get a bit anxious about the tech, but if I can get that done, then that's half of it done, isn't it? So lovely to see everyone, or not see everyone, but lovely to be here. Let's get that in the right place. There we go. Yeah, a little bit about emotional regulation. It's just a whistle-stop tour. Can everyone see the screen all right? Is that all sorted?
Yep, can see it.
Yeah, excellent. So it just is a little whistle-stop tour, but I was talking to so many people about emotions, and I absolutely believe that at the moment everyone is experiencing unprecedented amount and frequency of different emotions and intensity. So I'll just go through it, and then Q&A throughout if needed. I think Alex is going to help with that. But also at the end as well, so if anyone's got any other questions. So just quick, anyone who hasn't met me before, this is me. I run a little social enterprise called Alpha Inclusion and Communication, and we work alongside really neurodiverse individuals, helping with inclusion in education and the workplaces, right from all ages. And the next hour or so, 45 minutes probably, this is what to expect. I don't have a magic wand, so anyone who's come on here tonight going, oh, maybe I'll get rid of those emotions, nope. But I can explain a little bit about what they are. What's the point in them? There is a point, I promise. How they affect us, so what effect they have on our day-to-day and life and relationships and things. And then some top tips. It's not, like I said, not a magic wand. It's not everything, but it's just to get us thinking about things that we can do. And I think now more than ever, we were talking earlier about fatigue seems to be setting in. The adrenaline's gone of one lockdown. We've kept going, we're still going, and there's a lot of fatigue out there. So if you're feeling any of that, you're absolutely not alone. So we can have a little talk about that and a little chat about that. But I want to start off with what are they? What are emotions? Because to start with, they're a concept, they're conceptual, they're abstract, they're not concrete, okay? And that is what makes them tricky, but also very interesting. And there's a balance there, and sometimes we we find them more tricky, and at times we can be a little bit more objective about them. But actually, what I was thinking, well, what are they? When I was over the years, I thought, well, it's really hard to kind of pin down what they are in just a few words. But when I found out what it's actually a Latin derivative, the word emotions, and it comes from, and I apologise for any people who speak Latin out there, emotere, possibly, but you can see what it says. But it actually means, and this made complete sense when I saw it, it literally means energy in motion. So I want to start with that, actually, because if we can see it as energy, then it starts to make a bit more sense, because often emotions don't make any sense. Sometimes they do. So first of all, we've got emotions going around all the time. So whether we're attending to them or not, whether they're affecting us or not, it's loads of energy going around all the time. And even just feeling okay, there's that emotional energy going around in us. It's always there and always in motion. So that's why I think that term and understanding that kind of literal phrase is really, really useful. But we don't consciously recognize them. So we're not sat there going every day going, oh, right, what's that little twinge I feel? Oh, that must be that emotion. It doesn't quite work like that. But we don't even, we might get these biological signals, but we may not put any thought to them. So they might not kind of come to our conscious. We're just dealing with them all the time. So when we are aware of them and when we put that word to them, that's the feelings. So then we're going, oh, okay, there's this biological signal going on. Hang on a minute, I may be hungry. Okay, so the emotions are there all the time, the energy is there all the time going around in us, and when they become conscious, when we kind of recognize them and we're mindful of them, then we're aware of the feelings going on. We're aware of those signals we're experiencing. So for me, and there's lots and loads of theories around emotions, loads of science around emotions, but for me, getting a hang of that it's a physiological, biological thing we're experiencing, I think sometimes is a starting point. So some of those physiological things we're experiencing, and I chuckle with this because, oh, my sister's always going to kill me. There's so many stories around my sisters, but when we were younger, we knew to stay away from one of my sisters if she said, oh, I'm getting tense arms, which essentially meant she was getting a little bit frustrated with us or something, and we needed to maybe back off. The point is, she was experiencing a biological reaction, and she could tell us what that was, and that was the tense arms. So tense arms are one of the kind of physical reactions we might have to that emotion. We might be able to recognize that emotion through tense arms, but there are loads of others as well. They're the little clues that something's going on, that there's a change in our physiological makeup. Sweaty palms, I'm sure most of us have experienced that moment, and it could be for so many different reasons. It doesn't have to be standing in front of a load of people. It could be standing in front of one person, or it could be job interviews obviously are going to be high on that list, but also like there for me at the beginning, even though I've used Zoom loads, I've shared my screen loads, all these things, there's a moment when I think, oh, is it going to work? All right, so I might experience some sweaty palms in those kind of contexts, but you'll know you, and this is the thing, when we start cueing into those biological, physiological things, then we can start to get a hang of and start to get control of it. Heart rate, increased heart rate, oh my goodness, and it does funny things, increased heart rate, because it can then start to affect everything. So I know for sure when it comes to my increased heart rate, I can feel it, but also I feel like it's affecting things like my voice or just the way I stand or move. So increased, if you think of any kind of time when you're going to get increased heart rate, it's going to affect everything, because it's literally the blood going through your body. Okay, so that's going to be a sign that something's going on, something's changed. Some people talk about tightness in throat, and again that's a physiological reaction that can then affect how you speak, what you're saying, whether or not you can kind of cue into the words you're looking for. That happens all the time with me as well. Not a good look when you deal with communication, but you need to kind of recognize those things, that actually these are things that are happening to lots of people, everyone often. We'll talk about that in a minute as well, but there are loads of others. So I think take a minute as I'm talking about this, and just cue in and think, right, not necessarily what you're feeling at the minute, or you could think, well, what am I feeling at the moment? But have a think of the kind of physiological signs, the kind of the bits that you know that there's some change. And it doesn't have to be a bad feeling that you're recognizing, it could be a good one, but there'll be some sort of physiological change that gives you that kind of cue, that gives you that information. So we interpret these signs, and then we add a word for our experience. So often, if you haven't got a word for the experience, it genuinely, for me, it actually generally doesn't matter what word you put to it. It is the fact that you're putting a word to it makes it concrete rather than that abstract feeling. So there are loads and loads of feelings words, loads of them. And you get your kind of standard ones. But I think often when people talk about feelings, we kind of go to your default happy, sad, possibly angry. They tend to be the ones that people got taught in school fairly early on, and then sometimes somewhere along the line we stop getting taught language around it. But the language around emotions, emotional literacy, is like a whole different language. So you might be extremely articulate in maybe something technical. You might have all the language around, I don't know, historical context, or you might be able to know everything about geography, but it doesn't necessarily mean we're not born with the capability to have this language around feelings and emotions. So it's really important that we learn them, and I think sometimes it's assumed that we're just going to know what's going on in our bodies, but we don't. There's no real reason why we should. So hunger is going to be one. Now that's a fairly straightforward one for a lot of people, not for some, because they may not recognize they're hungry, but a lot of people, you'll be able to, especially right from an early age, be able to say, hang on a minute, something going on in my body. Oh, I think I'm hungry. I need to get some food. Tiredness, another one that's a kind of standard feeling that most people are going to experience on a regular basis. And I wanted to again start with these, because these are feelings that we're okay with, that we can say, oh, I'm quite hungry, or I'm quite tired, and we don't have any hesitation, because that's okay to feel those things. But they're no different to the rest of the feelings. So and some of the feelings aren't bad. And again, we talk about feelings, there's almost a default to talk about the ones that aren't so good. But happiness is a feeling as well, and being able to recognize when we're happy and the good feelings are really important, so that we're not just queuing in to the not so good ones, because otherwise we're just going to be recognizing those up. Frustration. Now often sometimes we do some work when we do work in schools, they might get us to come in and say, we need some help because this person's getting angry. Now I start to get a bit frustrated myself at that point, because usually when you're talking about anger, there's been a lot of other emotions before it got to that point. So it might present as anger, but actually often frustration around something or around an event is often underlying that anger. So some of these words and the same with anxiousness. So some of these words almost get grouped a bit too much into one feeling or one set of feelings, but it's a very different experience, those ones. So anxiousness, chilled. These are just some, so I'm just going through some of them. Joy, I know I was trying to think to myself when I last experienced some of these different feelings and what was going on. And actually it was it has been a tough year. So if you're thinking about these things and thinking, I can't actually remember experiencing that kind of that level of joy, that seems quite a long way away. You might have to go a bit further back, but that's okay. I think that's fair to say for the majority of people at the minute. So don't panic if that's the case. Fear is another one. Fear, and because it's so different for each person about what they're fearful of, it's sometimes we don't accept it, or we don't admit to it if we think other people aren't finding something fearful. Irritation, sometimes people or things can be extremely irritating, but do we say it? Do we cue in and know? Do we know the physiological signs of us being irritated? That's the kind of question, that's the thing to think about. Do you know the signs of other people being irritated? or irritating? Yeah. So it's really important to kind of do this. Now, I've only put a few up there. Excitement. Actually, the reason I put excitement up is sometimes we think of the kind of big feelings that people talk about, like anger and frustration or irritation, as being the feelings that cause the most disruption. But actually, overexcitement I've seen cause as much disruption as anger. So cueing into all the emotions is really important. Don't get me wrong, it's great to have overexcitement, but it's recognizing that actually there isn't really any physiological difference between these emotions in terms of the levels we can experience them at. We'll feel different things, we'll have different messages come through, but actually all of them can be on a scale, right, all the way through, right? So kind of overexcited or extreme anger. So what's really interesting is I watched a TED talk on Dr. Alan Watkins. I believe he's a neuroscientist, but he says there are 34,000 emotions, and I think he's actually developed an app to be able to track them, a bit like star constellations. Now, I'm not going to sit here and go through them. I don't have that many words, I'm afraid, and you would be gone in a few minutes, I think, if I started that. But the point is that I think we underestimate the kind of prevalence, I guess, of emotions, and I think by not kind of voicing them as much as, you know, for me it's really interesting, it's like a really interesting topic, but because it's conceptual, because we can't see it, it's not really raised just as a general thing in terms of it as being an interesting topic. And I think that's a shame, because I think the more we discuss it and start to think of it almost scientifically, I think the more it starts to make sense. So I'm not going to go through all of those, but just to be aware, apparently there are. But this is a really important thing. Now, I know, and I'm always aware of the word normal, because for me, normal is different, okay? Everyone who has got any kind of differences is normal, okay? So, but I wanted to normalize emotions, because the point of emotions are that everyone will experience them. And again, I don't think we say that enough. So if you're experiencing an emotion of any level, you are normal. I think we need to start there, okay? And they are part of this human and in some cases animal experience. It depends which animals you're talking about. It depends what your kind of take is on the animals. But actually, if we weren't experiencing emotions at some point, we would just be being robots, which I know at times would be lovely. I think we'd love that if we could just literally switch off the bits we didn't want. But actually, it is part of what makes us human. I know embracing it isn't always as easy. So I think the other thing is that they can be brilliant. You know, if you have a good day or a good moment, you can get that rush of excitement that see, I don't know the technical stuff about some of the work you do. So if I said you might get a rush about kind of completing code, well, does that make sense grammatically? I'm not sure, but you know, if you get that moment where something works really well in your work or your life, and you get that, oh yes, I've done it, that's great. Well, that's your emotion. That's, you know, own it, enjoy it. But on the other hand, recognize that there's two sides of it. So they can be brilliant and they can be extremely annoying. They are harder to control than the Xbox or the television or you know, something that we can press those buttons. They are hard, and it can take a lot of practice and a lot of understanding in order to manage them enough that we feel okay. And the other trouble with emotions is that if we experience them and they affect us in a way we don't like, there's then that kind of ongoing, oh bother, I didn't do it right, I didn't get to hold on to that emotion enough to be able to achieve something. So it can become this cycle of being scared of an emotion, of an emotional reaction as well. So recognizing that they're part of the human experience, recognizing they're normal, and recognizing that they can be brilliant but also extremely annoying, so you get the full spectrum of it. Okay, so I guess then the next thing we have to ask is, like, what's the point? What's the point of emotions? Why do we need them? Couldn't we just kind of shut them off? And as human beings, we would get on a lot better in our day if we didn't have any at all. So, well, yes, maybe that's probably a really good question to ask and consider. But they are important because you can't kind of separate emotions from that. From the rest of us, because they're a response to that brain processing the information. So we've got these systems going on, the brain's doing its job, and it's picking up these signals it's getting, and those changes of those signals producing that physiological reactions we can then interpret. So it's really important that we've got the words and the language to be able to do that. And actually, emotions help us do a number of things. So they help us survive. We'll look at the kind of emotions that over the centuries have helped us survive. They help us thrive, so that we know we can pick up information about our environment, and we can change our behaviour to suit that environment and to suit what we're doing. But they also help us understand fellow humans as well, which is important if we want to have relationships with fellow humans. So in terms of surviving, okay, from a very basic level, I don't suppose you're going to walk down any street and see this creature in the near future now, but in terms of evolutionary terms, on a very basic level, we have had to have emotions there in order for us to react to them, okay? So we wouldn't have been able to survive if I didn't have fear around certain things. My chances of survival are going to be lower. Sometimes that fear isn't always helpful, like when I was excited about going to climb the Leaning Tower of Pisa. I wanted to be excited, but that wasn't the overall experience and emotion I was feeling. It was probably fear, especially like when I would be prepared to kind of push children out of the way in order to be next to the barrier. So fear makes you do really strange things, but it is important. It's been important for our survival forever, and it continues to be. You know, if you saw a car coming down the road and you just stepped out in front of it and had no emotional reaction to that car, there's only going to be so long you're gonna survive. So emotions are important from that point of view, but they're also important for giving us very or thirsty. Again, if we didn't have those reactions, those physiological reactions, we're not going to survive, and we also won't thrive. So one of my cues, I used to have a technician that worked with me. She's absolutely brilliant and worked me out very quickly, and she used to say to me, Amy, have you eaten lunch today? And I'll be like, well, how do you know? And she said, because you do talk a bit more rubbish when you haven't eaten lunch. So there were days that I would just work, and I hadn't cued into the fact that I was hungry, but she was able to cue into my behaviour linked to the fact that I must be hungry. My body was telling me something and I wasn't listening to it, so I had to get some help there to recognise it. Luckily she got away with it. She was nice in other ways. The other thing is, though, that human connection. So obviously this is a baby, this is actually my baby, she's a bit bigger now, but if we don't have emotions, or we do have emotions, but if we didn't have emotions, it would be hard to understand and connect with other people, because if we can understand our emotions, it means that we can understand what's going on with someone else, and if we can understand what's going on with someone else, it means we can help react to what they need as well. So it isn't just about babies, it is about just that, being able to have any sort of relationship with anyone. If we know, it can recognise what our needs are and how we respond to things, it means that we can have empathy for someone else and what they need and respond to things. It doesn't mean we have to give them what they need all the time, it's just that being able to recognise that they're going through similar things. So they are important, they have got a point, but they do affect us, and that they can affect us in a good way, but they can have a bigger effect, and sometimes it's not so nice, and like, yeah, I think everyone's experienced that definitely over the last year. And there's something about maybe that loads of us have had similar experiences exactly the same time, that maybe it kind of brings us together anyway in some way. But emotions are linked really closely to our thoughts and our behavior. Often we think our thoughts are always true, they're always factual, they're always real, but sometimes they're not. So our thoughts about ourselves can link to our feelings, and they can link, and those two can link to how we behave. So as an example, let's just say I try and do a drawing, which is always hilarious when anyone who's seen me stick drawings are my thing, to be fair. But let's say I try and do a drawing, and I do a drawing, and I think, oh, that looks rubbish, and then I feel a bit frustrated because I can't quite do it right, and then I start to think, oh, well, I can't draw, so I'm not gonna, and I screw it up because I can't draw. So I start to get this cycle of, I believe I can't draw, so I get more frustrated when I try to draw, and then I get really annoyed with it and throw out the paper, and then I stop drawing. So that's a really basic example, but it's showing that our feelings and our emotions around both what we do and what other people do can then become this cycle of thoughts and behaviour. And then it goes round again. So then we might avoid certain things because we believe that we're going to behave in a certain way, and then we might get anxious every time that thing comes up because we think the same thing will happen. All right, so the emotions do affect us, they can affect us, but it could be a good thing as well as a bad thing. It doesn't have to necessarily be a bad thing. So more than just our thoughts and behaviour, it affects a lot more in terms of like, physiologically as well. So we need attention to learn, and our emotions can affect that attention. They can affect whether or not we're listening and whether or not we're paying enough attention and focus on what's being told to us or what we're seeing. And I'm sure if you sat there, you can think of some examples of when you've been had a heightened emotion of any description, and then afterwards thought, what was I doing? I can't remember what someone just said, because you're basically your brain is attending to that emotion. It's putting a lot of energy and focus on that, and it can't always attend to something else. Perception, it affects our perception. So if we have a good day or something, for example, one of the things I always find amusing, in an objective way, it's not always amusing at the time, but say like going to a supermarket. Now, if I'm having a bad day and feeling a bit grumpy, if I notice someone looking over and then doing some sort of face or laughing with their friend or something, maybe not so much in the minute because they might not have their friend with them, but in the past, let's just say I see that happening. So I've seen two people looking over towards me and then having a bit of a laugh. Now, if I'm having a standard day, not much going on, I would just perceive that as two friends having a bit of a laugh. If I'm having a grumpy day and I'm not feeling so good, and it's a bit rubbish, I might perceive that as they've looked at and then they're laughing at me. Does that make sense? So the exact same behaviour that could be happening can be perceived in very different ways depending on what's going on with our emotions. So they're quite powerful things, these emotions. Because then we can go back to that thoughts and behaviour thing. It goes to, oh, well, they were laughing at me. Oh, well, why are they laughing at me? Do I look funny? So it kind of goes around again. So it can really affect our day-to-day life. But learning as well. So again, think back to last time you were learning something. Let's just think back to your favourite lesson in school, and think about the feelings you had about that. Often with school, I remember some of the really good trips, and I can remember feeling really good about going on those trips. And I remember those things. I can remember the learning that happened on those trips. I can also remember some of the lessons I sat in that I really didn't have very good emotions towards either the subject or the teacher or whatever was going on. I probably won't tell you much in terms of knowledge about some of those subjects. So it does affect our learning, and it affects our motivation to do things as well. Okay, so they can affect us in lots of different ways, but it can affect our relationships and our health. So if we struggle to regulate our emotions, it's going to be hard in terms of the other people being around us. And it doesn't mean that they're not going to be around us, because often when you care about someone, you're going to be around them whatever their emotion is. Of course you are. It can affect how it's not just, we're not just sat alone. If there are other people around us, it can affect those relationships we have. Are they going to be honest all the time, or are they going to walk on eggshells? Are they going to be able to have a bit of a joke, or are they going to worry about what they're saying? And in terms of our health, well-being and understanding our emotions is so important, because there are so many conditions that are linked to excessive amounts of stress, or feeling really low. So but equally, if we can find ways to regulate it, regulating our emotions can also keep us healthy. So they are important, they are normal, they do affect us. But I think what we can think about is how we can affect the impact that they have on us. So move my screen a little bit. I can see where I'm going. So when we've got a heightened emotion, or we seem to experience them for a long amount of time, which obviously is really relevant at the minute, they affect our mood. So I was talking earlier about the fact that even though I might sleep, I sometimes am waking up feeling tired. And I think that's where you have to kind of cue into thinking that, recognizing that this is a long amount of time that we've been doing things differently, or not being able to do things that we would like to do. And also, most importantly, is our sense of control. So when we've got a sense of control of our lives, we're much more likely to have that better mood. So everyone, I don't think there's anyone that can say they've had control of every aspect of their life over the last year. So that can be it can have a lot of effect. So and because of that heightened emotion, it affects how we react and interact with others as well. And that's for all emotions as well. So if you've got some really good emotions going on, that can affect how we act, react and interact. And I think I have to keep talking about this, because again, we always tend to focus on the feelings or emotions that aren't as good, but it's a similar effect. We just don't cue into it so much. So if we increase our understanding of the concept of emotion, learn the language around it, and recognize when we're experiencing them, we start to take back some control. So if you get the sense that the emotions are controlling us, that's fine. That happens a lot. That's normal as well. But by starting to be able to understand them as a concept, not just this thing going on our body that affects us, really starting to think objectively about them and learning language around them, using that language, and then recognizing those physiological responses, that's the start point of where we can start to take some control back. So it's not just them taking control of us. And I think that's very important, because then once we do that, we can affect the impact that they have on us rather than the other way around, right? But it's that acceptance first. So the first thing then, regulating emotions. Now this is just a few little bits about it. There's huge pieces of work, and there's loads of research on it, and it is an interesting topic, and there are people far more intelligent than me that have got loads of different ideas on it. So do go and keep reading up on it, or have chats later and start to experience it as an investigation even. But regulating emotions, finding a way to be okay, can help us carry on, essentially. All right, it helps us successfully navigate work and study and relationships. And it doesn't mean you're not going to have bad days, or it doesn't mean emotions aren't going to be heightened. But it's just about feeling okay, really. It's not about feeling happy all the time. That's probably unrealistic. Although I guess I'm sure people would argue otherwise. Those that are super happy. that's quite annoying, actually, sudden thought that someone might be out there super happy all the time. So emotional regulation, let's see then, what does that actually mean? Okay, so emotional regulation is the ability to maintain a well-regulated emotional state. It makes it sound really easy. It isn't that easy for most people. So it's just being okay. But if we can do that, we cope with everyday stress. Now, everyone's got stresses going on, and if we can maintain a state of okay, it means that we can cope with those. You know, I can cope with the fact that I've just broken an egg on the floor. I can cope with the fact that I don't know, I've just opened the door and realised I've left my trainers outside in the rain, or whatever it is. So all those little things, if I'm regulated enough, it means that I can cope with those everyday stresses. If I'm not, I notice them a lot more. Actually, I was just thinking about another story. I really should stop putting anecdotes about my family and friends. They're going to stop me actually going on doing these things. So let's just say a very close friend of mine likes to leave his trainers or his shoes in front of the door. Okay, that's a little stressful for me if I trip over them when I try and open the door. Now, I can tell about myself how regulated I am by the level of frustration I feel when I trip over those trainers, because those trainers are there every day. That doesn't change. It doesn't matter how much I say it, that does not change. However, how I respond to it does sometimes change, and that is because I'm less regulated on that day. Now, it really pains me to recognize that that's me not being regulated rather than that person not. It has to be their fault, surely, that they've left their trainers there. But the point is, the person it's actually affecting is me, because I'm the one getting stressed about it. Does that make sense? So if we were regulated enough, those trainers and those everyday stresses, whatever they are for anyone out there, we can cope with them better. And it is amazing when you start to recognize that. I think, he must have left trainers there for a while, but I haven't noticed. But it's because I haven't had that physiological response at the same heightened level. It helps us adapt to changes. Now, this is key at the minute. We're talking about transitions. Changes are tiring. Now, even if you like change, a lot of people don't like change, but even if you do, what we've experienced over the last year is literally, I've never known anything like it. It's literally change on change on change, and every day you wake up and you see another news story or something like that, and it is, to be fair, it's getting to the point where you're like, oh good, another change. You know, you're almost kind of getting so used to it that you maybe we'll really struggle when there are fewer changes. I don't know, but being able to, when you're well regulated, it's not necessarily easy to accept and adapt those changes, but it's easier. So you're able to go, okay, I can see there's another change coming up, but I know I'm going to manage it. I know it's another change, but I know I've dealt with them before, so I know I will manage this again. I might not like it, but I know I'm going to manage it. And the other thing, if you're well regulated, is that you're available. Okay, so you're available for learning. That's when you can learn about things you're interested in, or a musical instrument, or a new language. It doesn't matter what it is, but you're available and able to do it. Even something like Pilates or something like that, which you might not need to necessarily learn and keep in your head. But I know if I'm feeling like not so good, even though physically I know I need to go to that Pilates Zoom session, I'm not there. I'm not able to do it. Okay, so working as well. So well-being has been on the top of every business's agenda, or it should have been. So I'm hoping it has been, because it makes sense for them anyway as a business, but putting that to one side, that actually being able to be well regulated means that we can be our best. And if you enjoy your work, it's important for you to be at your best. Otherwise it becomes frustrating. So finding that space, finding that well regulated, being able to be well regulated, means you're available for that, and interacting with others. And again, sometimes that might feel like you have to make that effort to do it, but once you're there, interacting with others can also become a tool to help regulate as well. So Emotional regulation is important. So let's look at some top tips for that kind of, how do I be okay? And again, these are just a few tips, and it'd be great to kind of, when we get to kind of having some chats about things, to be able to talk about how you do it as well. I think that's the key thing, that it is recognizing what is for you. But the first thing is you have to acknowledge it. And yeah, I've managed over the years to kind of now find emotions amusing at times. So if you they're not funny when they're affecting us, but if you can almost take that scientific approach, that kind of slightly stepping back and going, oh God, do you remember when, you know, that real embarrassing moment, like when, oh yeah, like, well, I think it was like my first, this is actually a true story. Oh, why do I have to embarrass myself as well? See, that you have to acknowledge it, okay? So first camping trip, away from family, just with friends, in a caravan site thing down in Newquay, and there's a whole group of lads kicking a football around, and us group of girls are walking down there. And I didn't used to be too bad at football actually when I was younger, so I thought, oh, the ball comes towards me, I think, oh yeah, I can do this actually. I'm not great at much, but this I can do. I can kick the ball, this will be fine. So I kick the ball. Oh no, I don't kick the ball. I step on the ball and I land on my backside. So it was so cliche. It was so cliche. Even now, when I think back, I get the physiological response of embarrassment. But the point is that actually it was quite amusing, because what was really amusing was the reaction. There's half the people going, oh, you okay? Because they thought they should, and the other half desperately trying not to laugh. So when you look back at those things, it was an emotion, it was embarrassing at the time, but the first thing I need to do is say it out loud. It was so embarrassing at the time, and it took a long while to get around that, especially as a young'un. But when you can start to kind of recognize that sometimes there are slightly amusing elements to it, I think it's important. But you have to almost, you don't have to say it out loud, but you do have to put it into a sentence. So I've got a really good friend that loves Warhammer, and at the moment you can't do it in real life. And I bet everyone, in fact we were talking earlier, anyone who's a musician, anyone who's a dancer, anyone who does anything that requires being out there doing it in real life, we've had to find a way to adapt. But it doesn't stop it being irritating. I'm irritated because I can't go ahead and do it in real life. It can't happen. So you have to acknowledge that emotion. You have to put a word to it first. Now, jealousy, I found this really interesting, because we rarely use the word jealous, but it is an emotion that I suspect a lot of us feel, which is all right. It's okay to feel that feeling, and again, acknowledging it. I'm feeling jealous and annoyed because my colleague managed to find a solution to that problem before I did. Right? That's fine. It's okay to feel that. What you do about it is different, of course. How you respond to that emotion is the important bit, in terms of how you then keep the relationships going or be okay. But first of all, you acknowledge it. Excited because it's only 5 days until the release of a new film or a new game. Recognizing the good ones, the good emotions when they're there, will mean that it makes it easier to manage the not so good ones. So if you're queuing into it, you can think, I'm feeling excited. It's a memory there. It becomes, you've recognized the good bits, so that when you get a not so good moment, you think, oh, okay, but this is just temporary. This is just happening now. Before I was feeling that good one. Okay, so it's acknowledging it, acknowledging any of the emotions. Okay. The other thing is making sure that you accept that it's normal and valid. And again, this isn't always easy at that moment, but it's really important to recognise that it's physiological, and there's a reason for it. So that's the starting point. So tell yourself that. And it's absolutely okay to have this experience. So humans all over the planet for decades and decades have experienced this similar thing. I think one of my favourite things is when we're allowed to go to the beach, look out at the ocean and watch that tide, because there's something about watching a absolutely huge natural element that makes you realise that your little thing that you're going through isn't that big. Okay, that actually that tide's seen it before. It's been in and out for a while, and someone at some point has experienced exactly the same thing. So it is recognising that, putting yourself thinking, actually, it's not as big as I'm feeling at the moment. And there is something I can do about it to feel okay if it becomes too much. Okay, so it's acknowledging it, accepting it, and then knowing that it is temporary. I think this is an old Persian saying, but it's been translated and it's been made into songs and all kinds of things. This too shall pass. Emotions, I'm not talking about like low mood, and I'll mention at the end about if you're feeling really, really bad for a prolonged length of time, that's different. Okay, that's serious. You have to kind of check in with yourself. But if it's an emotion, if it's that frustration or that feeling tired or low, and being able to say to yourself, all right, well, this will pass, it's temporary, it's a physiological reaction, and I can do something about it. It doesn't have to stay. The other thing is reframing both situations, but also emotions itself. So often we automatically revert to that negative again. So, oh, I'm feeling really nervous. No, yeah, you might feel nervous, but is it just anticipation about an event or something happening? Okay, so actually starting to change the language around it so it's not quite as kind of got the negative connotations to it. Frustrated, yes, but why are you frustrated? Because you're keen to get it right. That's not a bad thing. All right, if you weren't frustrated, it might mean you don't care about getting that piece of coding right, or you might not care that you can't quite say what you want to say in a particular situation. All reasons to be frustrated, but that's because you care. So actually it's not a bad thing what you're experiencing, and that can change. Now this is really interesting. When I went to Brazil for a few months when I was younger to do some voluntary work, and I just wanted to go, and people going, well, who are you going to go with? I'm not going to go with anyone. And they said, but won't you be lonely? And then I thought, I was going, oh right, yeah, I might be lonely. And then I went, actually, I'm not going to be lonely. I am going to be alone, but you're telling me I'm going to be lonely. I'm not experiencing lonely yet. All right, so be really careful that just because someone else thinks that might happen, it doesn't mean it is going to happen for you, right? Just make sure it's your own emotion you're experiencing, not what someone else might think you're going to. Okay, so really think about it. Now this got taught to me by a young man. We were talking about transitions earlier. I think he was going off to college or uni, and I think I asked him the question, which is a standard kind of question, what are you worried about? Have you got any worries? And he said, I'm really worried, Amy, but I am wondering. And I think that's so key. Now, language is so key. Now, I'd given him this negative emotion saying, oh, are you worried about something? And he quite rightly said, absolutely not. But I have got some information I need before I'm okay with it. So now I don't do about worries. We talk about what you're wondering. All right. So I just want to say that a language is really powerful, and language around emotions can affect how we interpret things. Okay. The other thing is find your thing. I'm aware of the time, so I will be finishing up soon, but finding your thing that helps and is helpful for you. And that's important, because I know there are things that we like, but if we go excessive with that, whether it's helpful for us long term is another thing. So now this is going to sound really cliche. Oh, take deep breaths. Now the reason I've put it there is because it is a standard thing, and I tried it the other day because the amount of times I do emotional regulation stuff, and I don't always apply it, and I was really conscious. I was like, right, I'm going to take deep breaths, and I did it, and actually it genuinely helps. It's about an oxygen thing going on. I don't know all the science behind it, but seeing as our emotions are physiological, it makes sense to respond to them physiologically. Okay, so taking deep breaths generally does help, but you have to actually stop yourself and do it, a real proper deep breath. Exercising, yeah, everyone always talks about some sort of exercise. Do it your way, do it the way that makes you happy. I couldn't care less if that's standing on your head, doing hand walks through the corridor. It doesn't matter. Right, it's using baked beans as weights, juggling with them if you can. The point is, don't worry about following the way or the popular way or anything like that. I think it is about physically doing something so that you feel a bit better. Something like yoga, Pilates, it isn't for everyone, but if it's your thing, then do it. Find it and do it. Taking some space from the situation. The amount of times I get hung up on something I'm doing with work, and actually it was by taking myself away from it that I found the answer. Trust that. You just have to trust it. I know it seems illogical, but trust it. Go and do something different and the answer will happen. You've got to trust your unconscious mind as well as your conscious one. Reading, some people like to read. I'm just throwing some different things out there. Drawing, that frustrates me because I can't do it. So as you might, so I don't do that to calm down. Watching, now mindless TV. I'm not talking about some lovely educational stuff. Obviously, if documentaries help do it, don't be frightened to watch something mindless to switch off for a minute. All right, it doesn't, that's fine if that's your thing. Writing things down. Lots of people find that. Whatever you want, if it's just for you, it's for you anyway. Cooking might be your thing. So I'm going to put some more of these up. If you can see, I'll say them out just in case you're listening rather than watching. But playing a game, any kind of game, online, board game, doesn't matter. Just make sure, again, it's helpful rather than unhelpful. So excessive amounts of time, so then you don't do any work or other things. Just be careful there. The same with gardening, spending all day in the garden and not doing anything else. You know, there's a limit to any of those. Sewing, finding something completely different, playing an instrument, any kind of instrument, taking a walk on the beach when we're allowed. You find your things. Animals really do help if you've got one. They are great. Doesn't matter if it's your animal, that's always going to help. Listening to music when we're allowed, the live music will be amazing. Just chatting. Now, when I say chatting to a friend, you lot do some great stuff at Nordiv anyway, having your weekly catch-ups. But it doesn't have to be about anything in particular. You might find the most random stuff as the stuff that takes your mind away from the stresses. So it doesn't have to be a purpose to the chat. It could just be being around someone and just chatting about whatever it is. Now, I put some of the standard things that people say, but I just wanted to put some of these things up. These are real things that people have found help them. All right. This was a young man. I don't think I've met anyone like him since. If I gave him a destination that I needed for when I was going down to London, he could tell me exactly what tube journeys I needed to take without looking at a tube map. He had that amazing, absolutely amazing, incredible brain and memory. But it also was something that helped him feel okay. So he used that when he was feeling stressed. He started to visualize that. Working through mathematical problems, finding an object of every letter of the alphabet. These don't seem like your standard things you'd find in a book, but these are all things that work really well. Building a Lego model, I know that works. Again, I'm not so good at it, so it does cause frustration. Someone I know creates a comic strip with characters from their life. Try it, interesting. You don't have to share it with people if you don't want them to see how you've portrayed them. Fiddling with your lanyard. Next time you go to a real life conference or something like that and people have got lanyards, just take a little look. How many people are fiddling? They might be using that to regulate their emotions, whether they know it or not. So there's so many little things you can use. I know somebody's done this, painting star constellations across their ceiling. I don't think it would help me, but it absolutely helped them. So think about things that genuinely make you feel okay. Identifying each instrument in a favourite piece of classical music. If you can do that and you're okay with it, and that's brilliant. And designing outfits for a fashion show. But the point is, it's that ... What is it that makes you feel okay? And we discuss this time and again, where recently we've had a lot of those things taken away from us. So we may have to be a bit creative and find the little tiny things at the moment that give us that okay kind of feeling. And the last top tip is about communication in the way that suits you. And it really, really does help it, but it doesn't have to be talking. So if talking is your thing, absolutely. But I want you to really think about what is your way to communicate. There are so many different ways and platforms to communicate now. And I think it's really, really important that we find a way that helps to communicate and to the people that we know we can trust to communicate with. So they're the kind of main things. Carrier pigeon, if you've got one, is absolutely fine. So don't just stick to, I don't really want to pick up a phone, or actually, I don't want to, I can't do this through email. Think about how you want to do it. Now, I have just put this on the end as well, because we've talked about emotions, but I want to just be really clear that if you're feeling really, really low, really bad, then you might want to get some professional help as well. You might want to talk to people that's their job. All right, that's what they're there for. So if you really don't think you can talk to anyone else, there's some numbers and or even a postal address as well. You don't have to just ring them up. So I just wanted to add that on the end if needed. But just to finish off, emotions are physiological, they're energy in motion. We can put words to those biological changes, and then that's the feelings. They affect us, whether we like it or not, they're going to affect us, and it can mean quite a few different areas. And learning about emotions and ourselves and communicating with others can help regulate in order to be okay. All right, there's my information. If you want to, please just get in touch. You can however you like, that's not a problem at all. But thank you. I'm just feeling I always go a little bit over, but we've got a bit of time, I think. If anyone's got any questions about it, let me move my screen around so I can stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Amy. That was awesome. Sorry, no, a little bit overwhelmed. Right, yeah, there was a question actually coming in, but I can't find the chat now. Where has it gone? There it is. Sally said, I always find it difficult to understand the purpose of anger. Any suggestions? And then Chris replied to say, maybe a coping mechanism to discharge energy or tension, perhaps?
Yeah, I think the thing with anger, I think, is that it often comes after other emotions. So often we're not recognizing necessarily what the other ones are. So maybe irritation or frustration or excessive boredom. Actually, I was saying that have angry effects on that. But often it's a build up of something. So if you find you're feeling angry a lot, it might be worth checking in on some of the other things that have gone on, because I like that whole thing around the trainers. That isn't about the trainers. It is about a build up of other things that have gone on, but it will kind of end up being in anger. But I don't think anger necessarily is always bad, because it is about recognizing it as a strong emotion and then working out what it is that's underlying that anger and then what you can do about it. But often anger, I think, over time can relate to bigger things that have gone on over time, whereas it's not just a little irritation. So I think it's worth thinking, maybe sitting down with someone or writing out, what is it that makes me angry? Is it specific events? Is it specific things? Or is it that there's something going on that's just not quite right in my life? And if you're feeling angry at the minute, you're definitely not alone. And it won't be at a person necessarily, it'll be at the situation. All right, but in terms of purpose, I'm not sure what the kind of evolutionary reason for it is. It would be lovely if we could just get rid of it. But I think it is anger's a funny one, because I think it's almost like a build up of lots of other emotions that haven't been expressed necessarily at the time. If that helps.
Yeah. That makes sense. It makes sense. I still don't know what. Yeah, like you say, I still don't know what its purpose is.
Maybe that'll be my next.
I'm angry at it.
Such a brilliant answer. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm going to put a shout out now to say, YouTubers, if you've got your questions, get those questions in now. Otherwise, we'll be closing off the stream to go for some private. That sounds weird. Private Zoom sounds strange, but yeah, without the internet. So we've got a few moments to get those questions in. Otherwise, I wish you a good evening, a good week.
It was a fantastic talk.
It was fantastic.
Excellent.
Thanks, Amy.
Thank you so much.
If you do have any questions later down the line, throw them our way. I'm sure we can relay them. I'm sure Amy will be happy to answer them on email or something. But yeah, have a great evening. Put those likes in. Don't forget to subscribe. See you later.